Fuck. I'm gonna put my car in neutral. Hello, internet. Hello, interwebs. This is another edition of The Sheldon Show. A little closer than normal. It's a very non-wide angle camera, which kind of sucks. So, you know what the old adage goes, if you get your work done in one day, then you ain't got no work for tomorrow. Well, I've strategically figured out how to always make sure there's at least an entire day's worth of work for tomorrow. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's the season. People are just pissed off because winter's coming, you know. Winter is coming. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Yeah, it's just insane. It's fucking insane. Little NPR there.
Magoosh, online test prep for the GRE, GMAT, ACT, and SAT that's designed to improve scores. Students can get video lessons, practice questions, and expert support online. Prep smart, go far, and enjoy the ride at magoosh.com. And by C3.ai, the software suite for digital transformation using artificial intelligence and IoT to solve previously unsolvable business problems. Learn more at C3.ai.
Support for Marketplace comes from the law firm of Dorsey & Whitney, helping energy and natural resources companies power the world and achieve their business goals. More information online at dorsey.com.
So I have a leak in my sunroof. Every time it rains, there's water in my damn right front seat. And I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Scholarships protect the environment and improve health and safety in Minnesota communities. Learn more at shakopee-dakota.org. Marketplace is supported by the Minova Global Health Summit, October 14th through 16th in Minneapolis, presenting nearly 100 health innovators, including journalist Katie Couric and Liwana Q. Ojala, CEO of Caring Bridge. For tickets, visit minovasummit.com.
Looking for something fun or interesting to do? Connect with NPR events.
There's a lot of commercials going on right now. So, what makes a journalist? That's a question I've kind of been having lately. You know, if you're on YouTube, you know, obviously you're on YouTube and Facebook, you know, would you consider Steven Crowder to be a journalist? Would you consider Ben Shapiro and what's it, the Daily Wire, something, whatever it's called? Would you consider that journalism, or would you consider that rhetoric? It's a little bit of A and a little bit of B, I would say. But if you were to say that, I think you'd have to call all media journalistic rhetoric. You know, do we have just flat, bland news anymore? It's a tough thing. Well, one thing I've always had difficulty of, especially when we're researching podcasts and shit like that, is finding actual numbers, finding reports that people are supposedly getting this information from. If you search a topic, you will continuously just get article after article, everything through a lens of somebody. And I think it's one of the main things that are wrong with today's world right now.
I'm not saying that they do feel under pressure, but...
Well, there's certainly the perception of pressure, right?
There's the perception of it.
Chair Powell says all the time, I'm just doing my job, but, you know, pressure is pressure.
Right. They wouldn't feel this pressure to stave off the ill effects of these escalating tariffs, because the escalating tariffs do have an effect on U.S. manufacturing, and the retaliatory tariffs do have an effect on ag. And all these things play into U.S. economic growth and unemployment and inflation and all the things that the Fed looks at. And had it not been for these tariffs, you know, that part of the equation wouldn't be there. And now they would be under other pressure. Obviously, you know, global issues. Brexit was going on, you know, regardless of the tariffs. It looked like China was maybe slowing down anyway, but this definitely seems to have sped things up and exacerbated the bad parts of all of that.
Let's take some sort of geopolitical context and roll it in here. The president has been mercurial in who he's going to tariff and how he's going to tariff them and when they get tariffed. Talk to me about, and maybe this is outside your area of expertise, but relations with our allies and the rest of the global economic community.
I think the tariff approach has eroded trust, right? It's not just tariffs on China. It's, threats of tariffs on autos, using tariffs for other purposes. So you look at the EU. I mean, we want a lot of other things from the EU. We want ag market access, regulatory cooperation.
Right.
But are the EU leaders willing to expend that when, after all that work, then they could just get threatened with auto tariffs the next day?
All right, so here's the $64,000 question. And I get that it's kind of unknowable, but if we had not been in the middle of this trade war, would people be talking about a recession as much as we are?
It's hard to tell. There are other global factors. I mean, I think of Germany, right? Germany is one of those countries when their big export markets sneeze, right? They get the flu. And when they get the flu, Europe comes down with pneumonia. So what we've done is really taken a big shot at a big country in Europe when they were already dealing with Brexit and already dealing with a potential China slowdown. And we sort of gut punched them, right when they were starting to slow down anyway. So that's an example of where you think, well, if it's just the tariffs, but it has this sort of cascading effect. Europe is, once they slow down, it takes them a long time to get back up.
Christine McDaniel, Senior Research Fellow at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University up near Washington, D.C.
So there, a bit to unpack there. There is a global slowdown occurring. We're still growing. Our economies aren't contracting yet, but there has been a slowdown, especially overseas, especially outside the United States. There has been a slowdown economically. When you look at Europe, ignoring China for a bit, if you look at just Europe's economy is slowing down. There are countries in the EU, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Italy is being hit very hard currently. Greece is barely recovered from their terrible recession that they had. When you look at it in the context of the EU pressuring and not coming to the negotiating table with the UK, it makes you kind of wonder why. Obviously, the EU wants its contracts with each country to be bulletproof. They want, if a country wants to leave the EU, they want it to be biting. They want it to be, they don't want people to leave on a whim. It needs, and countries within the EU, the reason for the European Union is to create less barriers to trade and things like that. Also hold employee standards to the same height, similar, wages, difficulties to fire people, free movement of peoples throughout Europe. And for a country to leave and then get almost the exact same deal, why have the EU then? Why allow a single country to kind of strong arm and make their own, deal that would be, basically they'd be not in the EU, but they'd get all the benefits of being in the EU. So it makes sense on paper why they would, have such a difficult, want to make it so difficult for a country to leave the European Union, because they're basically saying, hey, we all agree to these same rules. That's basically what's happening. But then again, wouldn't they, obviously the European Union is not solely dependent on the UK. However, it is not as if they are in a vacuum from their economy. They are affected by each other. You would think that they would want long-term good relations with the United Kingdom. It seems like a bit of shooting themselves in the foot in order to maintain this status quo. It's a tough thing, and I think that there would be a great opportunity for Donald Trump to step in and make a trilateral deal between UK, Europe, and America. To me, that sounds like it's ripe for opportunity, but nothing's really occurred there. And I know there have been talks between Donald Trump and the UK, but they've yet to come to any kind of fruition. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that, it looks like.
It was a movie that she put out, as opposed to Taylor, who drops albums, it seems like every time you turn around.
Yeah, Taylor still really abides by the one album every 2 years, do a big full rollout music release cycle.
Yeah.
She's very traditional in that way, whereas Beyonce has been more experimental. She did the surprise drop of her self-titled album in 2013, and then the surprise drop of Lemonade. So she's definitely playing with the format a little more, and Taylor tends to play it safe.
Last thing, and then I'll let you go, and it's something you said a minute ago, and it's a little bit of a steal from the financial crisis, if I could just do a little cross-branding thing here. The idea that she is now too big to fail, what does that mean?
It means that even if she releases a real dud of an album and it's a critical and commercial failure, she will still be one of the most popular musical acts in America. And lucky for her, Lover is getting great reviews.
Yeah.
It's on track to sell more than Reputation, so she's not really in danger right now.
Kate Nibbs, writing about Taylor Swift at The Ringer. Kate, thanks a lot. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
The fact that Taylor Swift is iconic. God.
This final note on the way out today out of Bentonville, Arkansas. Walmart CEO Doug McMillon, in a letter to employees, said that once the company works through its inventory, it's going to stop selling 2 sizes of ammunition that can be used in military-style weapons. It's also going to do the same thing for handgun ammunition, and it's going to stop selling handguns in Alaska, the only place it currently does sell them, so it'll be out of that market entirely. Market share-wise, it'll take Walmart from 20% down to about 6 to 9% of ammunition sales in this economy. Walmart stores, of course, were the site of 2 shooting incidents in just the past couple of months.
I hope there is a similar reaction to the way Dick's Sporting Goods, what happened at Dick's Sporting Goods economic outlooks, how quickly they went downhill after they decided to stop selling certain rifles. I think it was the AR-15 they just decided to stop selling. Fucking boycott them. This is you're either with us or against us, I suppose. This is come from someone who doesn't own a gun. I don't own a gun. They don't have to sell, and don't conflate with me saying that they have to sell us ammunition. They don't have to sell these rifles. And I'm all for mom and pop shops getting more business. Awesome. But for a company to stop selling guns because of a societal oddity. These mass shootings are not par for the course. They make up a very small percentage of gun crime in general. It's just the randomness and the news coverage that makes it disproportionate, and that's why you get these odd reactions. It's solving the issue by addressing the smallest aspects of the issue. That's kind of how I see it.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says he will free up $3.6 billion from the Pentagon budget to build President Trump's border wall between the U.S. and Mexico. Esper will effectively defund 127 military construction projects using emergency authority. Top Democrats slammed the move. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer calls it a slap in the face to those who serve the country and says that Trump is trying to usurp Congress's power of the purse and loot vital funds from the military. Coastal areas in Florida are seeing tropical storm force winds, coastal erosion, and some flooding from Hurricane Dorian. NPR's Greg Allen reports the storm is moving north off the Florida coast after bringing devastation to the northern Bahamas.
Hurricane Dorian has grown in size since leaving the Bahamas. Storm surge warnings have been issued for communities on Florida's Atlantic coast up to North Carolina. Dorian is a Category 2 storm and is not expected to weaken greatly as it travels up the East Coast. On Thursday and Friday, the National Hurricane Center says Dorian will be near or over the coast of South Carolina and North Carolina, and flooding may be a major threat. On Grand Bahama Island, volunteers and rescue crews have been using jet skis and high water vehicles to retrieve people from attics, where many retreated to escape rising floodwaters. Video and pictures from an aerial survey conducted by the government shows widespread destruction on Abaco Island. Greg Allen, NPR News, West Palm Beach.
Authorities in Southern California say it's unlikely anyone else escaped the flames that engulfed a charter dive boat Monday off Santa Cruz Island. 5 crew members escaped, but 34 passengers, reportedly sleeping below deck, are presumed dead. The remains of 20 people have been recovered, but officials say they will have to stabilize the burned-out boat sitting on the ocean floor before more bodies can be recovered.
Damn.
Wall Street lower by the bell. The Dow and the Nasdaq down about 1%. The S&P 500 down about 0.6%. This is NPR.
In the Twin Cities, I'm John Wanamaker, NPR News. Republican congressional candidate Michelle Fischbach says President Donald Trump's trade dispute with China will pay dividends, even as Minnesota farmers worry about short-term struggles. Fischbach is a former state senator from Painesville who was also briefly Minnesota's lieutenant governor. She said yesterday that she's running for the 7th congressional district seat, long held by Democrat Colin Peterson. Trump won the district by more than 30 percentage points in 2016. Fischbach is aligning herself closely with him on border security, immigration, and abortion. She also defends Trump's trade strategy that has resulted in steep tariffs. That includes Minnesota farm exports.
I think it is the long game, and I think the president was willing to take it on and really hold China's feet to the fire and make sure that we're getting a fair deal. So absolutely, I think it's going to take a little while maybe, but we are working as hard as we can. I'm sure the president is.
Peterson hasn't said whether he'll run for the 16th term next year. He chairs the House Agriculture Committee. The Minnesota State Fair has broken its total attendance record for the second straight year. Peter Cox has more on that.
More than 2.1 million people walked through the entry gates of the State Fair this year. That sets a new record for total attendance over the 12 days. The old record, which had 83,000 fewer people, was set just last year. There were also 6 single-day records broken during this year's Great Minnesota Get-Together, including the final Sunday and Monday of the event. 10 of the 12 single-day attendance records for the fair have been set in the last 4 years. A fair spokesperson says adding days on the front or back end of the fair is just not possible because vendors work earlier state fairs and the high school and college-aged workforce heads back to school after Labor Day. Peter Cox, NPR News.
In sports, the Minnesota Twins are playing in Boston tonight. They are leading 1-0 in the bottom of the first inning. This is NPR News. The time, 6:34.
The Daily is supported by Home Advisor, committed to helping homeowners find local pros for their home project.
So they're about to bring in Michael Barbaro. The trade war is a clusterfuck. It's really the only way I can describe it. It's when I look at how Donald Trump is kind of making these deals, I feel like one thing I would say is he's there's no doubt, and I don't think many people would say there is much of a doubt, that he's trying to get the best deal for America. I don't think many people would stand and say that he does not have American interests at the forefront when he comes to negotiating these terms, because there's such a fuck you mindset when it comes to them, which is the reason why he was so popular. It's the reason why he's so popular. It's because people feel like, he's not gonna, his ego is not going to allow himself to get screwed over by a deal, and we benefit because of that. I think that is a big, kind of understanding people have of that situation. Now, when it comes to how he's going about it, one thing I don't like, if you want to make a trade deal, fine, but the only thing you should be making a deal on is that just it's free trade, no tariffs, no nothing, just trade. Especially between our European neighbors, our Canada and Europe. Why not just have open free trade? Absolute open free trade. They have similar standards of living to us. They have similar restrictions on food, agriculture, those kind of things. Obviously they have very similar standards of living. When it comes to like Mexico, South America, Asian countries, China, I think having trade deals with more specific standards to be upheld is understandable. When it comes to poultry, making sure food is held to the same standards, medicine is in the same standard. However, what ends up happening is we start trying to piecemeal our economies. You get this, I get this. We won't impose. We'll let you do your have your electronics company sell to America, but you have to buy more of our soybeans and corn, those kind of things. And in the end, you're picking and choosing who wins. And it's something I do not like. It is not the government's job to decide how America fares in the world economy. It is every single person. We're competing against 6.7 billion people, when we're kicking their ass right now. And then to overcomplicate and incentivize certain industries, government is not able to determine where society and where the economy is going to be going for the next 10 years. A central body, regardless if they're elected or not, does not have that kind of foresight. Nobody does. That's the great thing about capitalism. Capitalism gives the ultimate ability to be flexible to people's wants and needs and how, the world grows as a result of that. And I don't like the way. What I would want to see is, I would like to believe that his intention with the trade war in China would be to stop the intellectual property theft, which is understandable. Stop subsidizing these businesses. Stop subsidizing steel at a state level. Stop devaluing your currency to make you cheaper than us. Play fair, but play ball as well. Not nickel and diming certain industries to prop up people at home, to make certain constituents happy. Oh, I need to win Texas next year. Let's make sure oil is at a good price for everybody. Those kind of things. I don't like the piecemealing going on.
What mood is the chief negotiator in as he walks out? Are they, standing in a corner? Are the hands waving? And are they angry at each other? Is somebody walking out in anger? But both sides have been really, really disciplined during these 8-9 months. So it's tricky work trying to understand what's actually going on upstairs behind closed doors. On the American side, there's a lot more interaction and they engage with the media more. But on the Taliban side, these are insurgent leaders that we had only known names of for years. It's the first time we're seeing their faces. It's the first time we're in the same space with them. Some of them, it's for the first time they're using phones in years because they were afraid of being, tracked down and hit by a drone. Mm-hmm. So it's in that context that one needs to rely on a lot of creative ways of creating comfort and creating trust. And sometimes that means lucky breaks also. I mean, for a couple of nights in one of the rounds, I happened to have a room just above the room of their chief negotiator. Mm-hmm. And one of the other negotiators was leaving session. And I said, hey, it would be great if we could have a conversation. And he said, where are you staying? And I told him the room number. He was like, oh, that's just above from us. So maybe I'll find you there. And it was late in the evening and I was typing an online version of the story and there was a knock on the door. and I was in shorts, and I quickly put on a shirt and I buttoned up a few of the buttons, and I opened the door. It was one of the negotiators standing in the doorway with a plate of cookies and dried fruit.
Wow.
He said, "I'm away from home. You guys are away from home, and one of our friends dropped off some cookies and dried fruit, and I wanted to share." Yeah, I was surprised, and I said, "Well, sure, come on in." And he came into the room and he sat in one of the couches, and for a second I thought, I can't tell this guy, "I'm sorry, sir, I have to file a story. New York is waiting on a story." It's like, this is when else do you get an opportunity for a midnight conversation with one of the most senior leaders of the Taliban?
When do you indeed?
When do you indeed? And so for the next 40 minutes or so, we continue a serious conversation about the political future of Afghanistan. This is a shadowy movement. We don't know a lot about the leaders of these groups. And here's an opportunity to try to understand, what do they think? What are their feelings about this stuff? So it's as much been an education in trying to understand what context they're coming with to these talks and these negotiations.
Okay, so let's talk about what these negotiations that you're trying so hard to understand are actually about. What exactly is being negotiated there in Qatar?
So the most fundamental framework is this. There has to be an American troop withdrawal. There are about 14,000 American troops and a few thousand NATO allies in the country right now. Mm-hmm. The Taliban have said the cornerstone of a peace deal has to be the withdrawal of those foreign troops.
Cool.
In return for that withdrawal, the Americans are asking assurances from the Taliban that they will not harbor international terror groups like Al-Qaeda again. Mm-hmm. The other thing that the Americans have gotten the Taliban to basically agree to is, once a schedule for the withdrawal of American troops is announced, the Taliban will sit down with other Afghans, including the country's government, to iron out the political future after the U.S. ends its military presence. The Taliban have all along said they would negotiate with the U.S. first about the foreign occupation, and then they will move into talking about the political questions of what happens to the future of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. That means, power sharing, that means changes in the constitution, that means things like that. But what is important is all of those discussions will be happening under a ticking clock, because the U.S. withdrawal would have started. So when these negotiations started, the Taliban are saying, "We want you out in months." Mm-hmm. And the U.S. was saying, no, we need a couple years at least, 3 years or something like that. And then the Taliban are like, "No, we want you out in months." And then the U.S. had to bring military experts to the negotiating table to actually explain to the Taliban how logistically ending an 18-year military presence simply cannot happen in a matter of months. Mm-hmm. So it's been bargaining and negotiating, and the timeline we think they've reached is about 16 or 15 months, something like that. The U.S. is willing to kind of give in to a shorter timeline because U.S. has domestic calculations also. Mm-hmm. President Trump wants out as fast as the Taliban. Good. Before the negotiations even started.
Afghanistan is a total and complete disaster. What are we doing?
President Trump was very open about his desire to leave.
Get out of Afghanistan. We've wasted billions and billions of dollars, and more importantly, thousands and thousands of lives.
So when you're coming to that table, you've already telegraphed giving what the other side would be demanding before you've even negotiated anything.
Mm-hmm. So the U.S. actually gave up a good deal of its leverage at the very beginning of these negotiations because President Trump said he wanted to get out.
Love it.
Yeah.
NPR hates them.
My assumption here is wrong, that the United States has that much more leverage than the Taliban does. You're saying, in fact, these are kind of co-equals in Doha, inside these rooms.
Pretty much. The U.S. actually might be even more desperate for this deal than the Taliban.
conjecture.
We'll be right back.
That would be an interesting segment. I'm happy to hear that this is in talks. Why the hell are we still there? We shouldn't be at all. It's such a waste of people, such a waste of money. Why do we care about Afghanistan? Let Afghanis care about Afghanistan. Let's do our best to leave, well, and then let's leave well enough alone. Guys, thank you for following me on my way home from work. Very much appreciate it there. This has been another edition of the Shellen Show. I might add another video tonight. I'm not too sure. After finding out how easy it is to create videos on my phone, we're gonna start pumping that shit out there. All right, guys, give me a like, give me a follow, give me a share, give me a subscribe. Thank you very much for following me home, and y'all have a great night. There we go.